is New Day with Chris Cuomo and Allison Camerata.
We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. This is New Day. It is Friday, April 6th, 6 o'clock here in New York. Chris is off this morning. David Gregory joins me. Happy Friday.
Still bleary-eyed. You do this every day? Every morning?
Wow. And it does start at 6.
It's been great.
It's great to have you. Here's our starting line. We begin with breaking news. President Trump amping up the rhetoric, now threatening China with an additional $100 billion in tariffs. Beijing is vowing to fight the U.S., quote, at any cost. So we'll discuss who has more to lose in this escalating feud. And the White House facing an ethics scandal involving the president's cabinet. Sources tell CNN that officials at the EPA were demoted or sidelined after they raised questions about Secretary Scott Pruitt's spending and conduct. Despite Pruitt's mounting ethical issues, CNN has learned that President Trump floated the idea of having Pruitt replace Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
And because there wasn't enough going on, President Trump is now breaking his silence on Stormy Daniels. And now it could have legal implications. The president saying he did not know about the $130,000 hush payment to the porn star made by his personal attorney, Michael Cohen. And President Trump literally tosses out the script, feeding his base plenty of red meat in the process, resurrecting some of his greatest fact-free hits and debunked claims. We've got a lot to cover this morning. We're going to begin with CNN's Ivan Watson live in Beijing with our top story. Ivan, good morning.
Good morning. That's right. The Chinese government is calling President Trump's threat for more tariffs a provocation. It's been such a bumpy week in bilateral trade relations. Let's go back and look. On Monday, China imposed $3 billion tariffs on $3 billion worth of U.S. goods in retaliation for U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The next day, the U.S. threatened tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods for alleged intellectual property theft. Then the next day, China responded, threatening tariffs on $50 billion worth of U.S. goods. And now President Trump has threatened tariffs on another $100 billion worth of Chinese goods. The U.S. is China's biggest export market. This would amount to, if he follows through on the threat, hurting up to 40% of China's exports to the U.S. But the Chinese threats are threatening some important sectors of the U.S. economy, including agriculture. Soybean exports, for example, last year amounted to $14 billion of business for U.S. farmers selling to China. And this is alarming some voices, such as Senator Ben Sasse, a Nebraska Republican, who put out this very critical statement saying that hopefully the president is just blowing off steam again. But if even he's half serious, this is nuts. Let's absolutely take on Chinese bad behavior, but with a plan that punishes them instead of us. This is the dumbest possible way to do this. President Xi Jinping has changed the Constitution, making him potentially leader of China for life. President Trump doesn't have that luxury, and he may anger some key parts of his base. Dave?
Ivan, thanks very much. The White House, meantime, also embroiled in a series of controversies as the president stands by the embattled head of the EPA. CNN's Abby Phillip, live at the White House this morning with that part of the story. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, David. This White House is battling one scandal after another when it comes to EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt. For now, the president is standing by Pruitt. He's happy with the job he's been doing over at the EPA. But the question is, how many more scandals can this White House sustain, and how long can Pruitt hold on to that job?
I think that Scott has done a fantastic job. I think he's a fantastic person.
President Trump defending scandal-ridden EPA chief Scott Pruitt, telling reporters that despite a growing list of controversies, he thinks Pruitt will be fine. CNN learned Thursday that multiple senior officials were sidelined or demoted at the agency after raising concerns about Pruitt's pricey travel, office spending, and management of the agency. Allegations and EPA spokesman disputes. Separately, multiple sources tell CNN that after Pruitt took over at the EPA, he asked his 24/7 detail chief to use the lights and sirens to avoid traffic. After telling Pruitt no, that agent was reassigned. Also under scrutiny, a massive pay hike totaling more than $80,000 for two of Pruitt's closest aides. The Washington Post reporting that Pruitt endorsed the raises last month, despite having said that he was not aware of the raises until this week.
Did you go around the president and the White House and give pay raises to two staffers?
I did not. My staff did, and I found out about that yesterday and I changed it.
Pruitt also coming under fire for renting a D.C. condo for just $50 a night from a lobbyist who donated money to his past political campaign. President Trump was asked if he was bothered about these reports.
I have to look at it in close. You know, I hear different versions of it, but I'll make that determination.
Sources close to the president tell CNN that as recently as this week, the president floated the idea of replacing Attorney General Jeff Sessions with Pruitt.
No, Scott's doing a great job where he is.
This as President Trump breaks his silence on his alleged affair with Stormy Daniels and the payment to keep her quiet days before the election.
Do you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
No.
Why did Michael Cohen make it if there was no strings or allegations?
Well, you have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's an attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael Cohen.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
No, I don't know. No.
Daniels' attorney telling CNN Trump's comments help his case.
You can't have an agreement if one party claims they knew nothing about one of the principal terms of the agreement. So the president has just shot himself in the foot, thrown his attorney, basically, Michael Cohen, under the bus in the process.
The president escaping these controversies at a speech in West Virginia. Mr. Trump literally tossed out his prepared remarks about tax reform.
That would have been a little boring.
Choosing instead to resurrect some of the unproven immigration rhetoric he used on the campaign trail.
Everybody said, oh, he was so tough, and I used the word rape. And yesterday it came out where this journey coming up, women are raped at levels that nobody's ever seen before.
Well, the president has announced that he wants to send between 2,000 and 4,000 National Guard troops to the border, but this is all happening at a time when relationships with Mexico right now are getting worse and worse by the day, not helped at all by the president's own rhetoric. He also has no public events today. However, Sarah Sanders is going to brief the press this afternoon, and there are a lot of questions, Allison and David.
Yes, there are. Thank you, Abby, very much. Let's bring in our analysts. We have CNN political analysts John Avlon and Brian Karam. Great to see both of you. All right, so the new tariffs that the president is proposing, the $150 billion new tariffs on China, I'm not sure that this is what Larry Kudlow meant a couple days ago by de-escalating.
It would seem to be the opposite, right?
My dictionary.
I mean, this is what he went. The markets were quelled after his advisors came on and said, this is just a negotiating tactic. We're going to de-escalate things. And then the president does this.
Yeah, those two things would be in contradiction. I mean, look, Larry Kudlow's insisting the president's a free trader, and I think the president's supporters have a point. No one's gotten tough with China. Maybe this kind of brinksmanship is necessary to reset our relationship. Fine. The problem is the escalation that people worried about seems to be occurring, and those things can get out of control very quickly.
They may already have gotten out of control. Right, but there is another side to this, which is you obviously saw the president spooked by what's happening in the markets, and so they want to tone this down and say, oh, you know, this is really just negotiation, which it still may be. There's something in the criticism about all of this that is perfect for Trump, which is that the establishment doesn't like his way of approaching China, which would only fuel him to do it his way, which is to rattle things.
I think we're overanalyzing it. I think the president speaks off the cuff, and now without the breaker there, which was Hope Hicks, you're seeing the staff come in afterwards and going, okay, this is what he really meant, this is what we're really doing, and we're going to have to back off.
Well, there may be some impulsivity, but this is a consistent point of view
on trade. He's been consistent in his point of view, that's true. Yeah. But speaking to what he's been doing in the last few days, I think, you know, they've described him as being unhinged, and I would say it's really hard to be unhinged if you've never been hinged. So this is just, you're seeing people that were able to put a damper on him, keep him from saying stuff. Now they can't, and now you're right. Yeah. It's the consistency.
But there are no tariffs actually in place.
No, correct.
No. And these But the point is that this would cover much more of the waterfront for China than the impact on the United States.
It would hurt China more.
Yeah.
China exports more to the United States than we import from China, but the problem is that we do have a real imbalance. They have also a very different situation in China than when Trump began his anti-China rhetoric. Xi now has basically lifetime power. They have a surplus. And look, I think the president is probably doing the right thing by going after, for example, IP theft. It is rampant. It is incredibly dangerous to American companies and hasn't been addressed. But this kind of brinksmanship, what's fascinating is how much of the impact would end up hurting Trump's base.
Well, let's talk about that, because it's been very interesting to hear what conservative lawmakers from the Midwest, those who support the president, are saying about this. So here's a compilation of those. For instance, Congressman Steve King of Iowa. They are not as concerned about trade deficits as they are by this emerging trade war, talking about his voters. Okay. Then there's Senator Pat Roberts. It's just a very unfortunate outlook that we have protectionists advising the president. So in other words, it's not the president, and that it seems he has an intrinsic belief in protectionism. Okay, there it is. Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa. I need for him to understand that we're hurting in the Midwest, and this is not helping, okay? So they're already getting nervous.
Oh, yeah.
And talking about it.
Well, the markets are nervous, too.
Yes, but what I thought was particularly interesting is you can already hear his administration, how they're going to spin it. This is not, don't blame the president about this, blame China. So listen to this.
What we have here is a situation where they've been basically punching us in the body and in the face for years. All we're doing now is self-defense, defending ourselves. And the way they expect us to react is to punch us some more and basically try to hit American farmers most directly. And I don't think the American people are going to respond very well to those kind of threats.
Okay, so it's China punching.
Yeah.
No?
Well, that's, John, like you were saying earlier, this isn't, and you were saying this isn't inconsistent, and it is maybe needed. But what are the results going to be? And at the end of the day, if they can flip the blame, how long is that going to last if you're coming home with less money in your pocket and you're distressed by the policies of this president?
Well, that's
the question.
Right. This is, Peter Navarro is a nationalist argument. It's a protectionist argument. You've got to be willing, you can certainly set up China as the aggressor here, which there's a lot of evidence to support over the years. But as Sarah Sanders says the other day, there's going to be short-term pain. It may be more than short-term pain. I mean, what I see is a president who's got consistent thinking, but also gets incredibly jittery when the markets tank, because not only the establishment, but financial markets around the world see the prospect of a trade war and get completely spooked to the point of correction territory. So is he going to stick by it and absorb the pain?
Probably not.
This is a president who's taken a lot of comfort from the fact that the stock market has surged since he was elected.
Right.
That has buoyed his approval ratings. But at the end of the day, what he should be most concerned about is impact on Main Street, not Wall Street. And that's what a lot of these retaliatory tariffs would target.
That's what got him elected as well. It was that underlying angst with American government that he tapped into very successfully. And can he maintain that if in fact, at the end of the day, you're living in Iowa or you're living in a red state and you're coming home with less money and you're more distressed than you were, it's going to be, it's going to be James Carville in 4 years. It's the economy, stupid.
All right, let's shift gears to Scott Pruitt. Just when you think you've heard everything.
China, Scott Pruitt.
Well, I mean, truly, just when you think that you've heard all of the possible ethical entanglements that he has, there's a new one. So the New York Times is reporting that 5 of his staffers, 4 of them high-ranking aides and advisors, have been reassigned after raising questions about his spending and his management. So in other words, I mean, it sounds like retaliation against people who tried to sound an alarm that something was not ethically passing muster.
And that wasn't actually, that's not news, what is being done in the EPA. Remember, when he first came into the EPA, there were scientists who were saying they were being kept from voicing their concerns and that they were being kept from putting out email and sequestered. So that's a pattern of behavior that the president still supports and says he's a fantastic man.
But here's the thing. This is the tension. This president doesn't like somebody who gets this kind of negative publicity, who's stealing the spotlight from President Trump. And these are self-inflicted wounds. I mean, this is just kind of reckless behavior on the part of the EPA administrator.
Corruption.
But at the same time, he's a hero. among conservatives for what he's doing at the EPA, which I'm not sure President Trump cares about as much, but he's certainly happy to have that level of support.
Well, he said that coming back from West Virginia yesterday. That was his defense of Pruitt. He's a hero in coal country. What he means is he's a hero to the industries the EPA is traditionally regulated.
Yeah.
Right? He's a hero to those folks.
To the robber barons.
Yeah,
That's who they...
Yeah, I mean, however you want to characterize it, he is very good for the industry, and our environmental advocates, not so much. But I think that's also what's interesting. You've got a series of patterns at this point, stories that are clearly abuse of power, arrogance of power, shady behavior. Now, we know that the lobbyist who was renting the sweetheart deal $50 a night apartment from was, in fact, their family was lobbying the EPA, contrary to their original statement. And then this pattern of punishing people who are dissenting inside the organization, all against the larger backdrop of policies, whether you approach it from ideological agenda or not, silencing people who are experts in scientific agencies, saying they can't use the terms climate change. That's objectively troubling.
Well, that worries us, but that doesn't worry. I mean, you were right. At the end of the day, don't overanalyze it either. This is the President of the United States who doesn't like people stealing his thunder.
Right.
That's what it boils down to. How much thunder is he going to allow Scott to steal from him before he jettisons another fantastic
But so the question is, can he survive? Because what he's got is someone who's extremely popular with his political base, with the business base that the EPA regulates, and he could use a Trumpian tactic, which is to say, this is overblown. I'll stick by him. And who's gonna topple him?
And the president could change his mind 30 seconds from now and be looking for a new EPA director.
Right.
Well, all right. Well, stay tuned, as we like to say. Brian Karem, John Avlon, thank you both very much. Now to this. Stormy Daniels' attorney believes his case just got much stronger after President Trump denied knowing about any hush money payment. Did the president expose himself legally?
President, did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
No.
Why did Michael Cohen make it if there was no strings around the nation?
Well, you have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's an attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael Cohen.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
I don't know. No.
Amid the noise of Air Force One, President Trump issuing a firm denial, first public comments about the Stormy Daniels story and the $130,000 payment his lawyer Michael Cohen made to the adult film star days before the 2016 election. John Avlon is back with us now, and let's bring in CNN legal analyst Ariva Martin. Ariva, let me start with you. Why is this a big deal? Stormy Daniels' lawyer is saying, aha, now the president has said no, and therefore he has violated the terms of this hush agreement. Everything's off.
Well, you can't have an agreement between two parties when one party acknowledges that he didn't even have knowledge of the material terms of the agreement. So if Trump is saying he had no knowledge of the $130,000 payment, there was never a meeting of the minds between Trump and Stormy Daniels. And that's the argument that Stormy Daniels' attorney has been making throughout this entire last several months, is that this agreement is not valid. It's not valid for several reasons. One, he argued that Trump never signed the agreement, and he's been arguing that if Trump didn't know about the payment, then there was never any mutual consent between the parties. So that was a major admission by the president.
Except, Ariva, that they've never said that the agreement was with Donald Trump. I mean, Michael Cohen has said the agreement was just with Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, and that the president didn't know anything about it. So the president saying, I didn't know anything about it, confirms whatever, or at least agrees with what Michael Cohen has been saying, that he didn't know anything about it.
But one problem with that, Allison, Donald Trump joined in the lawsuit that Michael Cohen is a part of to remove the case that Stormy Daniels' lawyer filed in state court to federal court. So if you are not a party to an agreement, you have no knowledge about this agreement, why are you joining a lawsuit to enforce an agreement that you're not a party to? It makes no legal sense. And you can't have it both ways. Either you're a party to the lawsuit or you're not. And by making the statement that he had no knowledge of the payment, where the payment came from, the fact that the payment was made, he's undermining his lawyer's position, and makes it very difficult for him to move forward with the position that he's taken. And I should say, most importantly, what Stormy Daniels' lawyer really wants to do is to depose Donald Trump. So if nothing else, they've created now this big ambiguity about who knew what and when, and I can't see a judge refusing Daniels' lawyer the opportunity to have Trump and Cohen testify under oath.
John?
Look, this is a great example of the costs of shooting from the lip, and the president can't help himself. Right? He's on Air Force One. He goes in to take questions. He talks about it for 25 seconds. You can tell by Trump's normal volubility, he's trying to say as little as humanly possible.
Right.
This is a series of no's and Ask Michael Cohen's. But in that, he would seem to play into Stormy Daniels' defense, which is that if you didn't know about the contract and you didn't sign it, is it really binding? And setting up, as Arif just said, a situation where he could be deposed. So that's a very costly, after a high degree of discipline by the president on message.
Let's talk about that timing. Why did he, after all of these weeks of silence and discipline, why did he respond?
I would not overthink it or assume there is strategy here. I think this was a moth to the flame situation. He walked back in Air Force One to gaggle, got a question, couldn't bring himself to say nothing, said as little as possible, but in doing so said enough to create real legal
I mean,
trouble.
this is a striking aspect of the president, which is he likes to talk, he likes to be available, he likes to take questions because it's kind of a rolling conversation that he's in charge of. The problem is you become, exposed in those things, and it's very hard for him to remember, no, this one I can't answer at all. Here's the other piece. I mean, I think what Areva said is important, which is ultimately it's the potential to depose him. That's what they want. Yeah. Clearly, Stormy Daniels and her lawyers want that attention.
But a judge has already shot that down, Areva. I mean, that's what Michael Avenatti...
He's refiling now.
No, he hasn't shot it down, Allison. He just said it was a premature request.
Yeah. That's right.
He just said we have to make some other determinations before we get to that.
But today, is it... I mean, Michael Avenatti says he's refiling. Is today it's still a premature request?
Well, it's not clear that the deposition is going to happen today, but it's pretty clear to me, based on the statement that Trump made, there will be a deposition if this litigation continues. The question becomes when that will happen. The judge didn't say Trump is, not deposable or that he won't be deposed. He just said we need to make some determinations about whether this matter gets sent to private arbitration before we move forward with orders regarding discovery.
Let's just pull back for a second. I mean, to me, the striking aspect of this story is the biggest pitfall is obviously a legal pitfall. We've seen this with Clinton, which is he doesn't want to get into a point where he's deposed and if it could become part of the purview of the special counsel. The facts of the matter, I don't think anybody thinks are really in dispute despite what the president says, and I don't think anybody cares. I mean, this is the least surprising part of the Trump presidency that this might be true in terms of for voters, right, who are going to make a judgment about him.
I mean, Bill Clinton sort of birthed this argument. Nobody, everyone knew he was a bad boy. Nobody thought they were electing a saint for president, but he's someone who could get the job done. I still think, objectively, let's not get too snowed in by the storm, no pun intended, that we're in terms of news cycles. The president and the porn star is a headline for the ages. He is lying about it. It also has real-world implications, not only for deposition, but for his family. So even if his core base, that 28% that's not moving no matter what, doesn't care.
It's not just the base. We have polls that show that 70%, I think, of Americans believe that this happened, but everybody's moving along with their daily business.
Well, life's going to go on. Life went on during the Lewinsky scandal, too. But I do think this is going to have real-world implications that continue to cascade, even if people are baking it into the cake.
Speaking about moving on.
Let's do that. Wow. Masterful.
Yeah.
Areva, thank you. John, thank you very much. Coming up in our next hour, we will speak live with Stormy Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti. We'll get him to answer all of these questions.
Also, UFC star Conor McGregor arrested after going on a rampage at a media event in New York. We've got details on that coming up.
Documents reveal that special counsel Robert Mueller is using information related to searches of Paul Manafort's personal belongings now in the Russia investigation. Prosecutors obtaining a warrant to get information connected to 5 AT&T phone numbers. The information is reportedly not related to the criminal prosecutions of Manafort. The former Trump campaign chairman faces indictments in Virginia and Washington, D.C. related to his foreign lobbying business from before the campaign. He has pleaded not guilty to both cases.
And in other law enforcement news, New York City police say UFC star Conor McGregor charged with 3 counts of assault and 1 count of criminal mischief after an alleged attack. That's alleged, all right, on a bus carrying rival fighters. Video capturing McGregor throwing something through a window on the bus. Police say a passenger was injured. McGregor was arrested following the incident at Barclays Center in Brooklyn on Thursday. He's due to appear in court this morning. I mean, shocking, only, I mean, it's not exactly, this wasn't like he was part of a caravan of the New York City Ballet. I mean, these are UFC fighters. I mean, this is not like the most uncharacteristic behavior of this guy.
Well, seeing him in tights, it looks like he's a member of the New York City Ballet.
Yeah.
He could, and his...
But he was mad. He just wanted to be allowed to wobble back to his corner. Remember when he said that after the fight this summer? You weren't watching the fight this summer?
No,
Mayweather? Okay.
I wasn't. But I did hear about it.
Yeah.
This is ringing a bell. All right. President Trump goes off script, literally, and the facts are the first casualty.
Alarming claims about women coming to this country from Central America. Listen.
And remember my opening remarks at Trump Tower. I used the word rape. And yesterday it came out where this journey coming up, women are raped at levels that nobody's ever seen before.
The president yesterday in West Virginia will bring back John Avlon and Brian Karem. John, what is he talking about? You know, throwing this out there, what crisis specifically is he mentioning without any information or any
without any information or context? And the question, what is he talking about, is actually a very good lens to put on much of the president's public comments, unfortunately. He was recalling his announcement in July of 2015, in which he famously said that Mexicans were coming into the country and raping people, but some of them were good people. I'm not sure why he's recalling this as a greatest hit. I think in the context of the moving National Guard to the border, he's saying that some of the human traffickers, you know, there's a pattern of sexual abuse and rape. That is
that's a real problem.
That is a real problem.
As migrants and people seeking asylum are trying to get to the U.S., they are raped. Not on this caravan. They're not. I mean, that's why they're traveling in a caravan, for safety.
And it's not a new problem. It's been an ongoing problem.
Okay.
It's not a growing problem. It has been a problem since people began coming across the border. And you pay coyotes to bring you across the border. Having patrolled that border, this is not. It's a disingenuous deflection of what the real issues are, and it's by alarming people.
But it's also suggesting that this caravan of people seeking political asylum, that they're rapists coming.
And that's not the case.
Not only is it not the case, I mean, let me just go to there was a BuzzFeed reporter traveling along with this caravan. Here's what he reports. I've been with the caravan for 12 days. Haven't seen or heard of anyone being raped at levels that nobody has ever seen before. To be clear, I haven't heard of anyone being raped in or around.
Well, here's the other problem. What we know about a lot of particularly women with kids who are seeking asylum from Central America is that they are, and Mexico as well, they are trying to escape abusive situations.
Yes.
And there's been nobody in the administration who says, well, we have to patrol the border and enforce laws. We have a real concern about what happens when these folks are just turned around.
Let's talk about how this all came about. This whole issue came about because he had a press conference this week, a joint press conference in which he took one question from an American reporter, and the issue he decided to talk about was the border. He switched gears and started talking about the border and said, hey, we're going to bring in the military. Now, afterwards, many reporters, me included, went back to the White House and said, hey, what about the Posse Comitatus Act? You can't really use the military to police the border. Now, there are exceptions for the National Guard, and several people in that administration did not know what the Posse Comitatus Act was, and then said, hey, well, in an account of a national emergency, surely he can't. No, he cannot. So then they went and did their research to see if they could back up what the president said, and then he came out with the National Guard, and then he doubled down by throwing away his script, and then doubled down again with the border, and it all conflated itself. This is typical Trump behavior.
Well, and other misinformation when he started talking about voting.
Why it's really important to reality check the president's comments
every day.
Right? I mean, look, first of all, illegal immigration across the border, illegal crossings have been declining since 2004. That's important. So the urgency around this is political. It's too often the president plays the fear card with regard to illegal immigration rather than dealing with the facts. He is now deploying National Guard troops to the border, but that number seems to be...
He's not done it yet.
He has issued the proclamation.
But like the tariffs,
and it looks like it will be. This will almost certainly occur because there's no constraining factor. But at numbers that are probably seem to be between what President Obama deployed, 1,200, and what W. Bush deployed, around 6,000.
There was another moment yesterday where the president brought back up something that has been debunked over and over, and that is that millions and millions of illegal people voted in the election, in the 2016 election in California. Secretaries of State have been interviewed about this. question. Across the country, we did not have a voting crisis, a voter fraud crisis. It does happen in small pockets, not to the millions and millions. Here's what he said yesterday again.
In many places, like California, the same person votes many times. You probably heard about that. They always like to say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Not a conspiracy theory, folks. Millions and millions of people.
Is a conspiracy theory, Mr. President.
That is a conspiracy theory. And I have but one question. If, in fact, this occurred, does this invalidate his election?
No, because he says they voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, right. That he knows.
Actually,
right?
one of the reasons he can't resist this conspiracy theory is that it rankles him that he lost the popular vote.
Exactly.
And so he says California had millions of people voting illegally, and so if you take that into account, he would have won the
popular vote.
vote.
Let's just focus on the facts, though. He had a commission to look into this.
A voter fraud?
They came up with nothing. He had to shut it down.
Yes.
So, I mean, the best way, I think the most important thing that people can take away is that there's no factual basis for a claim. Remember, this is also the guy who came into national political prominence claiming that our first African-American president was not born in America. So this is a problem because he'll go to places and people will hear it enough and say, this is true.
I want to pair him up with the Flat Earth Society. I mean, together perhaps they'll come up with something.
But I mean, Brian, this is the point. David's point is that I've done these voter panels where they quote that back to me because they have so metabolized it. It is part of their reality now. They've read it, they've heard it, they heard the president say it, and so they believe that.
People stay inside their own philosophical cul-de-sac, and then whatever they hear that echoes back to them and reinforces it is what they believe.
All the more reason that it's important that the president have some fidelity to facts, and this one does not. And what it has the net effect of doing, is unfortunately decreasing faith in our democracy, adding ballast to that argument that this is a rigged system, even though he won the election, and demonizing illegal.
I'd go further than that. It destabilizes the entire world. I'm sorry. You look at it. That's the bottom line.
Brian Karam, John Avalon, thank you both very much.
Serious stuff, but what about golf?
Let me tell you, after a 2-year hiatus, Tiger Woods officially returning to the Masters, but he gave fans little to cheer about, David. Details in the Bleacher Report next.
Lack of knowledge is just your contempt
It is.
for sports.
That's true.
But I think it's a
no.
concern.
I suffer through this. Go. You're going to make it exciting.
All right, Coy is here with our Bleacher Report this morning. Coy, go.
Coy, this is going to be a joint effort.
You guys. Hey, Jordan Spieth crushing it at the Masters is almost as automatic as Allison and David Gregory crushing it on New Day. He's played 17 rounds at Augusta National in his career, and he's been the leader or co-leader in over half of them, 9 times. He was on fire, especially on the back 9 yesterday. He only took 10 putts. He made 5 straight birdies. That is a career best for him in majors. He was the runner-up at the Masters in 2014 and 16. He won it all in 2015. Thursday, he finished a 6 under 66 with a 2-shot lead heading into today's second round. What's up with Tiger Woods? He appeared frustrated at times, calling some of the shots terrible during his first round. His game could have gone completely off the tracks, but he pulled it together. He's 7 strokes behind the lead after shooting a 73. That's just 1 stroke better, actually, than his opening round the last time he won the Masters in 2005. We'll see how he does today. You can tune in to CNN tomorrow afternoon at 2:30 Eastern for all access at Augusta, a CNN Bleacher Report special. Word on the street is Hines Ward does an impression of Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy. Sounds like must-see TV to me.
You know something about impressions, David Gregory. Are you a golf fan? Were you watching?
I'm not a huge golf fan, but I do like the Masters.
Mm-hmm.
I like the ambiance of the Masters.
Of course
Put it on, you hear the, the sultry tones. No, but I'm very interested in the Tiger story. I mean, I think, we're seeing in the area of Roger Federer at his age reestablishing dominance. I think it'd be pretty cool to watch that.
Okay.
Anyway, the Parkland High School student credited with helping police find the killer is returning to school.
The students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School are still trying to cope with the aftermath of that February 14th massacre. Freshman Kyle Lehman returned to school this week for the first time after he was shot in the foot and endured 3 surgeries. Kyle came face to face with the shooter, and he gave a description of him to police, which eventually led to the gunman's capture. Kyle joins us this morning with his mother, Marie Lehman. Kyle, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. What's it like for you to go back to school this week?
It was really overwhelming and, well, mostly fun. I had a carrier with me, which was really cool. I had a bunch of friends with me when I was transitioning through classes and stuff. So.
And what do you mean you had a carrier?
Friends.
What does that mean? You had a carrier with you?
There's someone pushing the wheelchair.
Oh.
So he actually had the officer who rescued him, Jeff Heinrich. He was pushing him, and also one of the a friend of ours now, the city council member Larry Vignola. He was also spending the day with Kyle at school and pushing him around. So they took turns spending the day with him.
Oh my gosh!
And then all his friends. He had a really, yeah.
That is cool. But tell me about all of his friends. What was that like? What did your classmates and friends do?
They just help with talk me, and they went to classes with me. They were really comforting.
And what did
it was a really warm welcoming. Everybody was very excited to see him.
I can imagine. I mean, because Kyle, you haven't been back to school in these. I mean, you know, it's almost been 2 months, and obviously, as we've said, you've had all of these surgeries, and I know that people didn't know for a long time if you were going to make it out so well. I mean, obviously, your foot was almost destroyed. Tell us about what happened.
Like, what happened at the shooting, or?
Well, just, I mean, about your foot, you were shot in the foot, and I know that you ran on it to get away, and that's where you encountered Sergeant Heinrich, who helped you, and then, I don't know, were there times that you thought that you might not be able to walk again or have use of your foot again?
When I was in more of the ambulance, I thought about it, but it wasn't really really in my mind at the time.
And you were the person who came face to face with the gunman. Tell us what you were able to tell police about that.
Well, I was able to tell the police the type of clothing he was wearing, the type of gun, the optics, and the magazines that he was using.
Where he was located.
Yeah, where he was located.
Well, that really helped them. I mean, they were able to arrest him in part because of that. Marie, what have these 6 weeks been like for you?
It's actually been kind of nice because I feel like we're getting back to a little bit of the new normal. You know, everything's been so surreal and overwhelming, and we've been concentrating so much on his healing. So I feel like we're, you know, getting closer to our regular normal lifestyle, which is nice because we miss that.
Of course you do. Kyle, is it nerve-wracking to be back at school?
Not really. It's more comforting than it is nerve-wracking, because there's so much people that've been through a lot of stuff, and they've seen things, and we're all here, and I'm here for everyone, and it's all like a big comforting place now.
That's so nice to hear that. And Kyle, what do you think about what's happened since then? The movement, you know, how so many of your classmates have taken up this cause, and how Florida has listened and lawmakers have changed things as a result of you guys.
I think it's great. It means that we have a voice, and that we could make a difference. I think this turned out to be for the best, but not in that way. But I think it turned out like there's so much good rather than negativity.
Gosh, you have such a great outlook, Marie. How does he have such a wonderful outlook?
I have no idea. No idea. But, you know, we do try to keep everything positive. I mean, it's a horrible situation, and we're trying to make it into, you know, as light of it as we can. I mean, everybody's been so good to us. We haven't expected anything. I mean, the hospital was amazing. The school was amazing. The community is amazing. Our doctors are amazing. I mean, everyone I feel like has been just above and beyond, like so kind to us and helping us. And it is a horrible situation, but you see so much more good in the world than you do bad. And I mean, it stinks that it takes something so tragic to see all that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we do try to stay positive. I try to keep him upbeat. You know, we try to keep everything as normal as possible. It's sometimes a little bit challenging, but overall, you know, we've been trying to do the best we can.
Well, Kyle and Marie, you guys have a great message of positivity. We know that obviously you have lots of hospital bills and you have a GoFundMe page people have been contributing to. I think we're going to put that up on the screen for a second so that people who want to can help.
Thank you.
They can find you at GoFundMe. Well, I'll put it out on Facebook if it's hard for me to read the small print there, but obviously you've raised money, and there is Kyle giving the thumbs up. Kyle and Marie, thank you both so much for telling us your story. And thanks to our international viewers for watching. For you, CNN Talk is next. For our U.S. viewers, New Day continues right now. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to your new day. Chris is off. David Gregory joins me. Happy Friday. Thank you. Great to have you here. We do begin with breaking news for you this hour. President Trump amping up the rhetoric, now threatening China with an additional $100 billion in tariffs. Beijing is vowing to fight the U.S., quote, at any cost. The White House is also facing an ethics scandal involving the president's cabinet. Sources tell CNN that officials at the EPA were demoted or sidelined after raising questions about Secretary Scott Pruitt's spending. Despite Pruitt's mounting ethical issues, CNN has learned that President Trump floated the idea of having Pruitt replace Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
And on the Stormy Daniels story, the president speaking out about it for the first time, breaking his silence, and it could have legal implications. The president says he did not know about his attorney Michael Cohen's $130,000 hush payment to Stormy Daniels. The attorney for Stormy Daniels, Michael Avenatti, will join us live in just a few minutes to discuss that. We want to begin, however, with CNN's Ivan Watson. He's live in Beijing with our top story concerning a new potential round of tariffs coming from this administration. Ivan, good morning.
Good morning, David. This is why everybody's talking about the risk of a trade war between the world's two largest economies. Let's just look back at this week. Starting on Monday, China imposed tariffs on $3 billion worth of U.S. goods in retaliation for U.S. tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. Then on Tuesday, the U.S. threatened tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods amid accusations of theft of intellectual property. On Wednesday, China retaliated with tariffs on $50 billion worth of U.S. goods. And then on Thursday, the White House issued a threat of $100 billion worth of tariffs on Chinese goods in retaliation for that. The White House saying that this is because of threats to American farming from the Chinese threats of tariffs. The response from the Chinese government so far is to call this latest move a provocation and saying, quote, we don't want to fight a trade war, but we are not afraid of it. Now, there are fears now from what China has already threatened. There are fears certainly within states that have a great deal of agriculture, and we're hearing those concerns echoed by some top lawmakers within the Republican Party, among them Senator Ben Sasse, who said, hey, this looks like President Trump is threatening to light U.S. agriculture on fire. Here's more of his statement. Hopefully, the president is just blowing off steam again. But if even he's half serious, this is nuts. Let's absolutely take on Chinese bad behavior, but with a plan that punishes them instead of us. This is the dumbest way to do this. There is a trade imbalance, and if China seeks to retaliate, as they've pledged in the past, they're running out of U.S. exports to China to slap tariffs on. We'll just have to see, is this more posturing, or will somebody follow through and actually impose these tens of billions of dollars of tariffs?
Right, that is the question, Ivan. Thank you. I'll take it. Thanks so much. The White House embroiled in a series of controversies as the president stands by the embattled head of the EPA. CNN's Abby Phillip is live at the White House with the latest. What's happening there, Abby?
Well, good morning, Allison. The controversy around EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt continues to grow today, but President Trump, for now, is standing by him, in part because he's happy with what Pruitt is doing over at the EPA. The question is now, how many more scandals will come out, and how much longer can Pruitt hold on to this job?
I think that Scott has done a fantastic job. I think he's a fantastic person.
President Trump defending scandal-ridden EPA chief Scott Pruitt, telling reporters that despite a growing list of controversies, he thinks Pruitt will be fine. CNN learned Thursday that multiple senior officials were sidelined or demoted at the agency after raising concerns about Pruitt's pricey travel, office spending, and management of the agency. Allegations an EPA spokesman disputes. Separately, multiple sources tell CNN that after Pruitt took over at the EPA, he asked his 24/7 security detail chief to use lights and sirens to avoid traffic. After telling Pruitt no, that agent was reassigned. Also under scrutiny, a massive pay hike totaling more than $80,000 for two of Pruitt's closest aides. The Washington Post reporting that Pruitt endorsed the raises last month, despite having said that he was not aware of the raises until this week.
Did you go around the president and the White House and give pay raises to two staffers?
I did not. My staff did, and I found out about that yesterday, and I changed it.
Pruitt also coming under fire for renting a D.C. condo for just $50 a night from lobbyists who donated money to his past political campaign. President Trump was asked if he was bothered about these reports.
I have to look at it in close. You know, I hear different versions of it, but I'll make that determination.
Sources close to the president tell CNN that as recently as this week, the president floated the idea of replacing Attorney General Jeff Sessions with Pruitt.
No, Scott's doing a great job where he is.
This as President Trump breaks his silence on his alleged affair with Stormy Daniels and the payment to keep her quiet days before the election.
Do you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
No.
Why did Michael Cohen make it if there was no strict allegation?
Well, you have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's an attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael Cohen.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
I don't know. No.
Daniels' attorney telling CNN Trump's comments help his case.
You can't have an agreement if one party claims they knew nothing about one of the principal terms of the agreement. So the president has just shot himself in the foot, thrown his attorney, basically, Michael Cohen, under the bus in the process.
The president escaping these controversies at a speech in West Virginia. Mr. Trump literally tossed out his prepared remarks about tax reform.
That would have been a little boring.
Choosing instead to resurrect some of the unproven immigration rhetoric he used on the campaign trail.
Everybody said, oh, he was so tough, and I used the word rape. And yesterday it came out where this journey coming up, women are raped at levels that nobody's ever seen before.
President Trump also announced yesterday that he wanted to send between 2,000 and 4,000 National Guard troops to the border with Mexico. Meanwhile, Mexico responding defiantly to the president's harsh rhetoric yesterday. They're going to need to cooperate with the president if they're going to control this immigration situation at the border. Meanwhile, President Trump has no events on his public schedule today, but there is a White House briefing scheduled for later this afternoon. Allison and David.
Abby, you're giving us too much to talk about, but thank you for all of that reporting. Joining us now for analysis, CNN political analyst John Avlon and CNN political commentator and host of CNN Smerconish, Michael Smerconish. Great to see both of you. So, John Avlon, Dow futures are only down 200 points, and that is better than the first time that the president floated the tariff threat idea, where they were even more rattled. Is Wall Street becoming inured to the idea that these things go up and down and fluctuate with the Trump administration, these threats?
Well, you know my deep belief that insane is the new normal, and the markets seem to have acclimated to a level of fundamental uncertainty when it comes to Trump and the prospect of trade wars. Look, the administration has been trying to message that this is negotiation, this is brinksmanship, but there's no question over the course of this week, it's escalated. And what's really stunning about it isn't, we can debate the merits of whether getting tough on China. You saw Ben Sasse, conservative senator from Nebraska, saying, we should be tough with China, but this is the dumbest possible way to do it. Why is he saying that? Because the impact in China's proposed tariffs on manufacturing, on agriculture, it actually ends up impacting Trump's base. 82% of the prospective jobs lost by this trade war, if it goes into effect, will affect Trump's base.
Well, and Michael, this is the point, that China has a way to respond that really hurts American consumers. That's the bottom line. It doesn't change the fact that this president wants to do things much differently. A lot of other people who've come on the program this week say we should talk, we should engage, we should apply pressure. I think the president would argue we've tried that for many, many years, and it's put us in a disadvantageous position. So there's two things. One, is the lesson of the week that this is really the prelude to a grand bargain? Or is the president prepared to tell his voters, look, you've got to be prepared to take some pain on this if we're going to win the overall war with China?
I think, to your point, when the cost of retail goods impacts his constituency, that's when there will be some political consequence for the president. But up until that time, he's responding in their eyes to an issue that's been out there for a long time, which is that, figuratively, the Chinese have been eating our lunch by flooding our markets with cheap goods, hurting U.S. manufacturing in the process, frankly, in much the same way as another issue that you've been talking about, which is porous borders. So they see him taking action on two long-standing issues that up until now, no one else, in their view, has been willing to address.
Yes, and I already hear the director of the Office of Trade framing it for the American people of, yeah, you should be upset about all of this, and look to China for who you don't look to the president. He's trying to fix this. So listen to how they're spinning it.
What we have here is a situation where they've been basically punching us in the body and in the face for years. All we're doing now is self-defense, defending ourselves. And the way they expect us to react is to punch us some more and basically try to hit American farmers most directly. And I don't think the American people are going to respond very well to those kind of threats.
So, John, what do you think of that? Will American farmers blame China because, you know, the U.S. has been their punching bag, or will they blame the president for this tariff escalation?
Look, I think people ultimately vote with their pocketbooks, and if people start feeling it in the economics of it, I mean, part of the reason free trade is good isn't only that it helps stop wars, but it tends to lift all boats eventually. But there are imbalances. I think people are sympathetic to the idea that it's time to get tough with China, that they have been flooding U.S. markets, not only with cheap imports, but also with counterfeit goods, which is why the intellectual property argument is probably strongest. But what Navarro is doing is actually a classic tactic. This goes right out of Trump's crippled America playbook. We've been taken advantage of. We've been humiliated. And the fact we're taking initial action on this is really self-defense. But if the impact ends up hurting the people he's trying to defend, that won't fly politically.
Well, and so if we turn to Scott Pruitt at the EPA, Michael, this is another kind of classic case of tension in Donald Trump's brain. On the one hand, it's a tough guy who is doing things that the conservative base loves with regard to rolling back EPA regulations, helping the businesses that they regulate, and yet he's getting all this negative attention, making a lot of mistakes, and new reporting about pushing people out who called him on that. What does he do? What's Pruitt's future?
So I think that the more that we talk about it and the more that Pruitt becomes a lightning rod by critics of the president without there being one real tangible example. I mean, heretofore, what's the worst of it? It's probably that $50 a night room. I think the president becomes emboldened. And if he were, I know this sounds odd, but if he were inclined to cut him loose, he doesn't want to do that in the face of criticism. He wants to do it on his terms. And so, oddly, the more hot the guy becomes, the more longevity he might have in the short term.
Especially, John, if the rap against the critics is that they're basically criminalizing his ideology. Which in this, there's already people making that.
Because that's the best argument you got. I mean, look, there's a series of ethical scandals and problems and distractions. One thing the president doesn't like is when people get too high of press and then start distracting from the administration's message. And he apparently did interviews without White House countenance. The White House has been sending mixed messages behind this on Pruitt behind the scenes. Trump supporting him publicly yesterday. In Normalville, that would be a positive thing, except, you know, that's usually a precursor to being fired by tweet.
But just one thing, Michael. I mean, in terms, it's beyond the just $50 a night for the room.
Sure.
We now know from the New York Times that 5 of his staffers, 4 of them high-level advisors, have been reassigned, have been moved out when they tried to raise questions about his spending and management. So that sounds like retaliation. That sounds like an ethical spider web beyond just getting a sweetheart deal at a friend's house.
Understood, but I'm just saying that in order for this to be saleable as scandal, there needs to be something tangible that people can understand and appreciate, right? I mean, we all understood the Watergate burglary, because a burglary is something we don't want to happen at our house. Whitewater, it was always more ephemeral, and you really couldn't wrap your head around a land transaction that went south. I'm not sure yet, within the Pruitt issue, what that one item might be.
Maybe it's the forcing his staff to drive through the streets with sirens and
I don't
lights.
think so. I don't think so. That's my point.
Yeah, I understand.
I
hear you yet, but there is a drunk with power feeling.
Yeah, there's
it.
arrogance of power, abuse of power, and also one of the classic problems is death by 1,000 cuts. And Michael raises the point, is there an ideological element to this? Yes, there are a lot of people who see an EPA administrator who sued the EPA 14 times as sort of a fundamental problem. But I think it's the distraction and the constant drip, drip, drip of ethical problems and allegations of abuse and arrogance of power that may ultimately.
The question is for whom? I mean, we come back to the beginning, which is President Trump would be willing to withstand that if he, but you know, I don't think he's so worried about it unless it gets to a point where it's so distracting to him or that he's getting too much attention that it interferes with stealing his thunder.
Okay, Michael, there's a new tweet that the president has just put out about what we've been talking about in terms of tariffs. Despite the aluminum tariffs, aluminum prices are down 4%. People are surprised. I'm not! Exclamation point. Lots of money coming into the U.S. coffers and jobs, jobs, jobs. Your thoughts?
Well, he had a carve-out for aluminum and steel, right? I mean, this is part of the contradiction of what he does. He announces something with such a bold vision and then immediately negotiates back from it. And the question is whether the issues that we're discussing today, these new tariffs that are proposed, not initiated, will ever come to pass. And you just don't know, and I'm sure that President Xi doesn't know either.
Yeah, but when two leaders of the two most powerful nations on earth don't know the outcome, that's usually a bad thing because things can get out of control. Michael makes a good point. The president's negotiation strategy isn't simply carrot and sticks. It's begin with a big stick and then offer a bunch of little carrots. But there's also a healthy dose of reality distortion field. And simply saying jobs, jobs, jobs is about as convincing as trade wars are good and easy to win.
John, you were pointing out that the tariffs would mostly hit Trump. Yeah. Country that voted for him. We have an actual graphic of that that illustrates. So there were these counties, 2,783 that went for him, and that the 82% of those counties are the ones that would be directly affected by China's tariff if it all happened. So there you go. All right, gentlemen, thank you both very much.
So the president is also breaking his silence, not just on tariffs this morning, but on Stormy Daniels. Did he hurt his own case by what he said yesterday? That's coming up next.